Flosstube, Kate here from Colorblind Cross Stitch. It is May 6th today, so happy Mania to all of those people who are doing Stitch Mania things, or just watching people do Stitch Mania things. There is lots of starts and whips and May craziness going on amongst cross-stitchers right now. It's great. Today I have for you, I have a finish and a start. So, first off, a quick note. Sadly, I did not actually get to go to the post office this week, because every time I was not busy, it was raining. So, Bevan Verpi, I don't know if I'm saying your name right, Verpi? I don't know how to finish. I don't know how to finish language. Not finish. You know what I mean. Anyway, I have envelopes. They are ready to go. I just need to go to the post office, which hasn't happened this week because busyness and then rain, and I didn't think that, walking 20 minutes in the rain would be very good for your packages. But they're there. They will get mailed as soon as I get to the post office. I have not forgotten. Okay. Righto then. First off, I had a very tiny start and a very tiny finish. So here is my very tiny start and my very tiny finish. I hope that if I hold this up here, he will focus and you can see him. This is a tiny cute frog that I made for the top of my Ort jar. So he says, "Rip it," because he's the frog, and I love puns. So I'm not sure how I'm going to get him onto my jar yet. I haven't quite figured that one out. Google found a pattern for me. So that's what I used. The rip it, I did that completely freehand by myself, so I'm kind of proud that it actually came out and sort of fit, and I didn't screw that up terribly. So yeah, that's my tiny Ort jar frog. I actually did him with the Michaels Loops and Threads thread. He is on a scrap of 14 count Ida, which I attempted to dye with mint tea. So it should be kind of green. I'm not sure if it's actually kind of green, but I was going for green because, mint tea is kind of green. So I don't know if it's actually green. And I do have to say, having done him with the Michaels Loops and Threads floss, it works perfectly fine. This is 3/1 on 14 count. I think it is actually a little bit thinner than the DMC. I tend to like to do things 3/1 on 14 count anyway. But just kind of using it compared to, for example, my Dragon Sampler, which I don't have here at the moment, is also 3/1 on 14 count. And I feel like the DMC is just a little bit thicker than the Loops and Threads. I also found that it tangled a lot. You have to be really careful to drop the needle repeatedly, because this stuff really likes to tangle, more than the DMC sort of seems to. So I don't know if that's maybe just a consequence of it being thinner, or a consequence of the way it's made, but yeah, so that's Loops and Threads. It's not, completely terrible. I'm certainly not going to stop using DMC and start using it all the time. Also because there are only 36 colors compared to the 450 plus that are DMC. But for a little project, it worked pretty well. And that's my tiny Ort jar frog, which will somehow end up on the top of my jar. I'm not quite sure how yet. I haven't figured that part out. But he is a tiny frog. He was a tiny start and a tiny finish. He took me 3 days. He was like my pre-mania start because I started him on April 29th. And then finished him on the 1st of May. So that's that. And then, because it is May and it is mania, and because I finished my little frog on the 1st of May, I also started on the 1st of May, I started my Egyptian Sampler, which I am super excited about. There's what it will look like when it's finished. There's all sorts of stuff. Egypt stuff. I do love me some Egypt stuff. So, here is what I've gotten so far. I'm going to hold that up and hopefully you can sort of see. I have Osiris's legs and his torso and some of his arms. And this is my very first time stitching over 2. It is 2 over 2 on 28 count antique white Lugana. I have to say, I love this fabric. I don't love stitching on it. Like this Lugana fabric is just really nice. It's really soft and supple, and like it's got a good like weight to it. It doesn't feel too thin, and it just like it feels just really nice. But I don't like stitching over 2 very much. I can do it. I can do it on the 28 count. I can see the holes well enough, just barely, to do my stitching over 2. And this pattern has a lot of fractionals and like specialty stitches and things, so like I'm glad to do it stitching over 2, because it will make my life better in doing all the fractionals and things, but I do not like doing that on a regular basis. I'm probably still going to be an Ida person for most of my patterns, because it is really hard to see. I don't know if you can see. I don't know if you can see, but sometimes I screw up my stitches and put the thread through the wrong hole, and so a couple of them I can't really notice while I'm looking at it until I take a close-up photo, and then I see, oh, that thread was, you know, 1 hole too far, and my cross is slightly big, and it looks kind of weird in a couple places. Some of them I've caught before that happened and then undid the stitch and redid it in the right place. Some of them, if you look, you can actually see there are some stitches that are oddly shaped because I put my thread through the wrong hole. So that is me stitching over 2. And I actually managed to do at least a little bit of work every day so far. This has kind of been my mania May thing, as I want to try and do just a little bit, if only a little bit every day. So Osiris is his body is mostly done now. I finished 1 color of gray, I have to finish the white and the other color of gray, and then there's a darker gray under his arms, there's a darker gray. And then he has like a collar of, like, I don't know, a jeweled collar or something up here, big like band of color, which I will do, and then his head and his hat. And actually what I'm going to do, I've sort of done legs up to his arms. I'm doing his arms, and then he has like a fancy sort of like jeweled collar thing going on. And a head, and then his hat. And what I want to do is, he is charted to have normal colored skin, and I think I mentioned this before, but in Egyptian mythology, Osiris very often is depicted with green skin because he's all about the, like, growing things and the crops, and, like, because he gets killed and then Isis resurrects him, and the Egyptians associated this with, like, their seasonal cycle, because they had every year the Nile would flood, and the flooding of the Nile would bring a whole bunch of, like, fertile, like, soil down from, is it Sudan? I think it's Sudan, that's the south of Egypt. And it would wash down all this, like, fertile, like, soil and stuff and deposit it on the, like, basically the Nile Valley where the Egyptians lived, and that would be, like, the fertilization for their crops. So it was a lot like the land would be, like, all dead and dry and dead, and, you know, everything would have, like, dried up and died and been done. And then the Nile would flood, and then suddenly everything would be green and growing and full of, like, they'd be able to, like, plant for their next year's crops. And so Osiris and his whole, like, he died and then he was resurrected is a whole, like, the Nile flood. The land would die and then the flood would come and it would be resurrected for the next year kind of dealio. So Osiris has all sorts of associations with green and growing things, and so as a consequence, which is what I was getting to, he is very often depicted as green. So I want to give him a green face instead of a skin-colored face, and thanks to the lovely people on Stitchmania, I think I have a set of greens that will work. Someone suggested there's a set of, like, beige greens, greeny beiges, that are, like, DMC, like, 645 to 649 or something. For whatever reason, I happen to have all of those greens in my stash, so I should be able to do the conversion without having to buy any more new DMC thread. However, I need to stitch his hat first, because in this one, his hat is also green, and I didn't realize that when I was thinking about how I'm going to do his face, because usually he wears a white hat. He wears the white crown. Sometimes you see, like, Horus here has, like, the red and white crown. Usually they come together, like, for Horus, because that's basically the two halves of Egypt. But you sometimes get someone who wears only one half of the red and white crown, and I think Osiris he has kind of like the bowling pin white half. It really does look like a bowling pin from the front, with the ostrich feathers, and usually the ostrich feathers are in green. But Teresa Wentzler, when she obviously did him with a green crown, presumably to make him different from Horus's crown. Horus is a little white crown, he is a little green crown. So, with white ostrich feathers. So I wanted to stitch his hat first, and make sure when I do his green face and his green hat don't look the same. And I think it should work because his face is going to be beigey greens, and his hat is very, like, green and, like, blue-green, like, very green, judging by the colors. So I think that should be okay. And he'll have a green face and be closer to how he would be depicted in ancient Egyptian art, which will make me happy, and he'll get his association with green and growing things. The other thing I realized this week, while I was thinking about this, is that I'm pretty sure that is supposed to be Isis. Can I see the glyphs? I can't make them out well enough. I can't make them out well enough from here. Maybe if I look at the pattern. I wonder if they are... Let me have a look. Here's my copy of the pattern in like 25 pages. Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like the hieroglyphs have, I'm not going to show them to you because that would be the pattern. But like Isis, one of her hieroglyphs is like a throne. And it's there in the panel, so I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Isis. What's interesting about her is she's actually wearing Hathor's headdress. Because usually Hathor is the one who has the big cow horns and like sun disk. Very often Hathor also just has the face of a cow. So she has like cow ears and then cow horns and a sun disk. So apparently for this one, Isis stole Hathor's headdress. That's not too weird because, at least by the New Kingdom, Isis steals everyone's everything. Everyone becomes Isis. For some reason, I don't know why, the Greeks and the Romans, might be actually by the time the Romans took over the Greeks, I guess they really liked Isis because she goes from being, I mean, she's pretty important in general anyway, because she's like Osiris's wife and sister, and so she has like, usually she wears her throne hieroglyph as her headdress. And so she's like all about, you know, royalty and queenship, and she helps with the whole causing the Nile to flood and, you know, resurrecting Osiris, which is also about like causing the crops to grow so people don't starve, and that's kind of super important. But by the Greco-Roman period, a whole bunch of other goddesses just kind of got associated with Isis until by the time we got to like the Romans in Egypt, she was Isis of 1,000 names or Isis of 1,000 faces, and basically all of the goddesses were assumed to be aspects of Isis, and Isis, I think, actually like her like cult, if you will, actually spread like fairly far into Europe, if I recall correctly, with like traveling like Roman legions, you know, before the fall of the Roman Empire. So yeah, so there's Isis. She's wearing Hathor's headdress, but eventually like everyone is Isis. So there you are. There's your Egyptian history lesson as taught by, you know, me and Teresa Wentzler's Egyptian Sampler, because I'm kind of a bit of an ancient Egypt nerd. That's that. That's that. Yeah, so I'm going to continue doing Osiris's arms and his chest, and then he'll stop looking like a penis. I showed this to my Christopher, my person, and like I took a picture. I hadn't done like the tops of his arms yet, and so it was just this bit and then down to like his feet, and my Christopher's response was, "It looks like a penis." So now I can't unsee slightly phallic Osiris, and so I'm going to share it with you so that all of you will look at Osiris and see slightly phallic Osiris until he gets his like the rest of his arms and his chest, and then he'll stop looking like a penis. Yep. That's him in his mummy wrappings. Holy shading. That is 3 colors, and it feels like this took me forever, even though it was only like 4 days or 5 days. Yeah, 5 days. And I think part of it is just because this is the whole pattern, like the whole piece of fabric. So Osiris is not a huge part of it. He's right in the middle, which is why he gets done first. You know, and he's a decent size, but comparatively, compared to how much of the rest of the pattern there is, he seems like he should be fairly small. And then also he's 3 different colors of like shading. So, and I'm working on 28 count over 2, which is slower anyway, because I can't see what I'm doing as well. So I feel like I was working on like mummy legs for forever, even though it wasn't really forever. But I feel like I was doing 3 days of just his legs, of mummy legs, dead mums, which is another amusing story for you, not directly related to Osiris, but at one point, my sister took her daughters, my 2 nieces, to the ROM for an afternoon, the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, and they have a big Egypt exhibit. It's probably one of my Egypt and dinosaurs. I think Egypt and dinosaurs are my favorite exhibits at the ROM. And so the next day I happened to go visit. I was down visiting them, and so Liz was like, "Oh, well, do you want to tell Auntie Kate what you did yesterday?" And so my niece Penny was like, "I saw dead people," and then went on to explain that, with Liz's help, my sister's help, she explained that they went to the ROM and they saw the Egypt exhibit, and Liz was trying to explain the whole concept of mummies to them. And so she was like, they're dead people wrapped in bandages, and they're called mummies. And so apparently Penelope and Matilda, my 2 nieces, were like, "Dead mums? But you're alive, Mum!" So that's why Osiris is a dead mum as opposed to an alive mum. Because obviously mummy as in mother, not mummy as in dead person wrapped in bandages. But that's something else I keep thinking of when I'm working on this, because of Penny going, "We saw dead people!" Which is, I think, not quite what Liz expected her to say, and definitely not what I expected her to say. Like, "What did you do yesterday?" "There were dead people!" Okay. So yeah, that's Osiris and Egyptian history, ancient Egyptian history, and my story about dead mums instead of living mums. Osiris being a dead mum. Yeah, that's what I was working on, because I have been working on that. I have actually worked on it every day this week. Every day this week, which I usually don't manage to get stitching done every day, because I'm usually too busy. But it worked out that I was able to put in at least a little bit every day. I'm going to continue working on that. I think I'm going to basically make that my May thing, because it's like my Mania start, and it's also my birthday in May, so it's kind of like an early birthday present to myself to like have bought all the floss and fabric and gotten it started. And I really love the pattern, even though I'm not entirely enjoying stitching on 28 count. I don't completely hate it, so I haven't like put it down and like given up, but it's definitely slower going than doing it on doing it on Ida. So it's gonna take a while, but it's gonna be super pretty when it's done, because like there is all sorts of like blends and shading, and like it's gonna look great when it's finished. I do still have my dragon sampler. It currently lives in my backpack. So if I'm at school, or if I'm traveling or something and I want something to work on, I can pull that out, because it's easier to do. I don't think I could do like the 28 count even weave, except at home, where I can get my lighting to be exactly right, so I'm not straining my eyes too much. And so yeah, that's that. I didn't get any happy mail. I did order some needles. I actually found a really good price on bulk bowen needles, which is exciting. So I've got some like 26 and 24 tapestry needles coming, which was like $12 for 50 needles. It was amazing. So I'm super excited. $12 US, which was like $17 Canadian, but that's still a really good price for needles, and so I should have needles to last me for years, which is good. I'm actually pretty excited to get my new needles, and that I won't have to worry about running out of needles or losing them, because before all I had was needles from my mummy, which is great. I have a great mummy. A living mummy, not a dead mum. Living mum. My living mum is great, and she gave me a bunch of needles last September, like a dozen of them or something, or half a dozen, from like random kits, which has been keeping me going, but I tend to bend them, break them, and lose them, and actually mostly just wear the coating off of them. I don't know if like my hands are just like, I don't know, super acidic or something. Does that happen to anyone else? But like my needles all like get, like where I hold them, they get worn. And so I'm a little worried that they're going to start like marking the fabric because they're no longer like shiny silver. I've kind of been using them anyway when they're worn, because I'm like, well, I don't have any other needles. But I'm sort of like, I don't know if I should be using these needles because they're kind of getting worn and have a dark spot on them where my fingers are, because apparently my fingers just like, I don't know, eat through the coating or something? So I'm not sure what's up with that. But I have needles coming, and then I will have lots of needles in both the sizes that I will use, and that's pretty amazing. I don't know when they'll get here. Hopefully they won't be as slow as the magnets and scissors and bobbins from eBay that still haven't come. One day they will arrive, and I will make needle minders, and it will be great. That day has not happened yet, because my magnets are still somewhere in transit from China. And that is everything. Actually, no, that's not quite everything, because the other thing I need to mention is that I have the best friends, and I mentioned that my Christopher, made my like intro logo thing. He still has to finish it. He needs to make me a spheroid. My head is flat. And eventually he's going to sit down and like give me shading, and so that the like emoticon head is not flat. But for now, I'm a bit flat. However, my other friend Joy, who is super awesome, actually does like a whole bunch of like, she's a linguistics grad student like I am, but she arts in her free time and is super good at like drawing things. And so we were talking to her about my logo, and she drew me a Joy version of my logo person, of just like me in my head being happy about my cross stitching, which I am going to insert at the end to be the end of my videos, because it is awesome and really well done, because Joy is amazing. But I wanted to mention that this was my friend Joy who draws things and is wonderful, and that's where that comes from. Will come from. I haven't done it yet because that's editing. That gets weird. But it's gonna be great. So yeah, that's all I have to say. I think I've rambled on enough. I feel like half this video was about like Egyptian history and not cross-stitching, but you know, it is what it is. So yeah, I hope you all, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if that's your thing. I love all my comments. I do read them. I don't always have useful things to say in reply, but I do read them all, and I love them all, and appreciate them all. So if you have things to say, feel free to comment. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. I'm happy to answer. Like, If you liked the video, dislike. If you didn't like the video, you know, if I'm talking too much about Egypt and not enough about cross-stitching, that's a perfectly valid criticism. And, you know, if you want to see more of me talking about my cross-stitching and life and things, then please subscribe. And I will see you next week. Until then, happy stitching, have a wonderful May, and mania craziness of starts and whips and stitching everywhere. It's super fun, and I will see you next week. Goodbye!